in chapter 16. It's called Creating an Interactive iOS App. What we're going to do on Thursday is we're going to build this app. And we're going to build it as a class both in here and we're going to build it in the Android class. We'll put a little bit more into it because this is really simplistic. But when we do it in Android, we'll do it using a grid layout so you can see how that's done. So hopefully that'll make it easier for you. We'll try to put in at least an image view. So if you had any problems with that, we'll do all that on Thursday. All right, and hopefully we can do that in the first hour. And then in the first hour of this class on Thursday, we'll build this one and we'll build it. And when we get done building it, we'll talk about auto layout. The author shows some really simplistic ways to do auto layout in here, but what you're going to find, it's like chapters 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24 are all chapters on auto layout. There are 3 basic ways you can do auto layout. You can do it in code, okay? You can do it semi in code, which means that you use code, but it doesn't look like regular Swift code. And you can do it by using, there's a bunch of stuff that you can see that's down here. It's these things that are down there. See those? There's a pin menu and there's another one, and we're going to talk about that. Then chapter 24 talks about these things. And this says WNE, HNE. And those are called size classes. All right? So we're going to, between the rest of the period today and Thursday, we're going to cover everything through chapter 24. All right? Then the idea is a week from today, we'll go over about 15 more chapters, so that'll put us into 40, then 55, then 70, and then it's break time. All right? But the other book I'm hoping we're going to be done with, or pretty darn close to being done with by break. And then during the break, I'm going to write and say, okay, this is your schedule for these last 8 weeks. At the end of the first week, you're going to have to give me a 2-page requirements document on what you're going to be doing your final project on and explaining to me in depth what it's going to be. Now, it might change over time, I get that, but I want to have some kind of an idea. I'm making a game. Don't do that, put it in really huge font so it takes 2 pages. That's not a requirements document. That's a piece of garbage, all right? But I'll try to give you some guidelines on what I'll be looking for. Then the rest of the semester, that's what you're going to be working on. So those of you who have a tendency, for whatever reason, to not show much, probably won't be here that often. Some of the rest of you who are here mostly all the time, you'll be here all the time, all right? And either way, that's fine, you know? I mean, Robert, like with what you're doing, what you showed last semester, if you're working on that game, if you can incorporate that and make an Android version and a Swift version, if you want to do that, that's cool. I'd rather see you create something that either A, you can try to sell, or B, you can try to use, or C, kind of combine that, you can use to market yourselves. Remember that at the end of the semester in the DIP class, it's going to be mandatory that you come in here that last Thursday between 10 and 12, and everybody who's in that class is going to present. All right, and I'm hoping that you're going to show what you did in this class and what you did in the Android class, even if it's the same thing. What's cool is, you know, you can have an emulator in here. You can show it in the emulator. All right, we can hook up the Macs. If you want to run it on the Mac, you can do that too. All right, but anything that we can do that helps you sell yourself, that's what, to me, that's why I have you do that. Yes.
For the final project for the DIP, you want to, does it matter if we do an Android or is it going to be web?
No, the final project, I'm just to the point now where I want you to do, you're going to do 2 final projects. Okay. All right? You're going to do one for this class and one for the Android. If you want to go and work on something else, for instance, like you, let's just say that guy you're doing the Thresher eSite, let's say he just came to you. You can show that. But if you don't, you know, if you've just got work that you can do in those 2 classes, that's fine. I hope that you'll show when you're presenting what you did for the Thresher E thing. And by that time, all of you who are planning on graduating, ideally will have finished your internships. You know, like Holly, your internships is very unique, but you'll be able to at least talk about what you did in there. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if you've got stuff to show or not, but regardless, okay? And the rest of you, if you're still working on an internship, that's fine. If you didn't sign up for the internship class, but you plan on graduating, you better see me because I can still get you into the internship class. Yes.
Can we use, I'm using internship for either my brother-in-law I'm working on right now or a friend that I know that works for the city of surrounding areas of Texas for an app. I can use that as my final project for the Android and iOS.
Yes.
And the internship at the same time.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, it sounds like there'll be enough. It sounds like there'll be enough work.
It's a lot.
All right. Yeah.
I might not finish it all the way.
All right. So what you do in here, notice, says first drag out a text field and put it here. Okay, and he goes through all the different stuff and he starts talking about this. The whole thing when you start working with auto layout is the topic of constraints and how something basically is connected to something else. All right, and there's actually a bunch of different menus here. I don't want to get into them in too much detail because it'll be easier to show you with a project. All right, but when you do this, these are going to bring up different menus. And with one of the menus, not this one here, but with one of the menus, what I can say is, let's say that right at the top I've got a text field. I can say I want that text field to be 100 pixels from the top. And then it's 100 pixels from the top, whether it's the top of the screen in portrait or whether it's the top of the screen in landscape. Does that make sense? All right. Then everything that comes underneath that, you put that in a portion to the thing that was on top. So you stack things up in whatever way you want. That's the auto layout in a nutshell. That's what you'll be doing. But again, the idea is whether you turn it portrait or landscape, you want it to be presentable in both. It would look, to me at least, very amateurish if one of you presented here and you were showing it and you said, oh yeah, it looked real nice here. You go, yeah, it looks really good in landscape too, and you made it landscape and everything disappeared. That wouldn't look good. Even if, well, I just have to swipe up a little bit. You kept swiping and nothing happens, you know, that doesn't look good. All right. When you start to do this though, you'll notice it says update here and it says update down here. And the difference between these two things is the updates that are down here updates everything on the screen at once. But if you change one single thing and you just want to update that, then you choose this one that's up on top. And notice what it says, selected views versus all views. All right? And you go, what do you mean views? Everything that's on your screen is a view. This is a view controller. This has a button view on it. This has a text field view on it. This has a label view on it. They're all views. That's the way the system looks at it. All right? So this is pretty simple. You put a temperature in there, you click the convert button, and it gives you something. Maybe if I have time, we'll add something to that. All right? But I think hopefully it'll be enough that it'll show you and hopefully fill in some of the gaps that people might have. All right? All right, and they tell you how to add the actions and add the outlets. You know how to do that already. If you're having any problems with actions or outlets, read the chapter. All right, honestly, I can't say this to you too many times. I literally did spend some time looking at books this summer. And one of the reasons I went with this one is, although some of the examples in here are real trivial, usually when he goes over something that's important, he goes through a regular program. All right. So if you're behind on this stuff, take a look at it and see if it makes sense to you. So he goes through this in much depth. This is all the code. There's not much in there. All right. What's kind of cool in here, see this? You may or may not realize it if you look at that code right now. What he's doing in that code is he's doing input validation. Because he's saying he's telling you to only do the calculation if there's something that's in there. Remember that even if I make it a numeric keypad, what happens if I don't put any input in there whatsoever, right? All right, so I could put an else down here, where in here I would say result label.text equals you must enter a temperature. So he's doing at least some input validation right there. And that's what he explains in here. I'll let you read that yourselves, okay? And again, that looks kind of poor. So we already know, I showed you that in an earlier example. how we can take that using the string dot format, set it up to 2 decimal places. I think that looks better. If you think the whole number looks better, you could do that too. All right, we've talked about hiding the keyboard. So if you still were confused on that touches began, that's explained in here. All right. And it may not look exactly the way that we did it because there's more than one way to do the same thing in here. All right. Now, Luke's favorite chapter, because he loves looking at hierarchies. So they do talk about in here in chapter 17, they go through the view hierarchy. And let's just keep it simple because there's three or four pages in the whole chapter. As I said to you, everything in here is considered to be a view. All right. As it says, common types of view that subclass from UI view include things like labels, image views, buttons, text fields. Everything is a view. And they're all views within the main view, which you already know is called the view controller. All right. So he talks in here, he goes even a little higher up here, and he said, well, what about the window class? He says you should be familiar with the concept of a window. All right, and they talk about what it is, but there's not really anything in there that you haven't seen before. So if we created an app, and in our window we had a view controller, which had a button in it, and it had a label in it, and it had a text field in it. You know by looking at these now, these three are all children of this, which is a child of this. You should all be able to go look at that and read that. And you can break anything off. You may or may not have noticed this, but if you've ever looked in your object library, which is like your toolbox, and you type in the word view, you can put a brand new view inside of a view if you want to. And that's what they're doing here. All right, and he used different colors to make it stand out. But you can see when you look at this, you've got one view that's got what in it? A button, a label, and another view. A button, a label, and another view. That second view has in it a button and an image view. So this is similar to the way that we talked about creating multiple layouts within this, in Android within the same layout manager. All right, it's a similar type of concept. It's not identical because they're not identical applications, but the ideas are similar. So again, there's a view controller. What we have to get to, and we have to do this before the break, is we have to get to talking about having apps that have multiple pages on them and how you go back and forth between pages. Because this garbage of just doing apps with one window on it, they're not cutting it. We got to have more to it than that. All right. So what he shows in the book here on page, it's about 130 or something like that, is he breaks down and he talks about each one of these different view types. I'm not going to read them because you can't. All right. But he breaks them down and he talks about everything that's a subclass of view. All right. All right. Now here's the big thing then, an intro to auto layout. Chapters 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23, I believe. All 6 of those chapters are on auto layout. And he talks about the different ways that you can do auto layout. One thing he mentions is prior to iOS 6, you use this thing called auto sizing. The reason that that's important is there still is a feature called auto sizing. But as he starts to explain layout classes and auto layout in here, he said, let's disable this auto sizing stuff. We'll learn about that in a different lesson. All right, so we don't worry about it. We concentrate solely in here on auto layout. I've already given you this, but just so you know, what they're saying in here is you implement this behavior through what are called constraints. You want to constrain something so that it's always this amount away from either something on the screen, be it a portion of the screen or another control on the screen or whatever. And you try to lay it out in such a way that if the app is going to run in both portrait and landscape layouts, that it looks not just presentable, but good in both. All right, I went over this too fast, but just so you see this, I won't even go back there. But that chapter 16, that the thing where they built the simple app in there with the temperature stuff, they did introduce auto layout in there. but they just had you click a few buttons. They didn't really have you do much of anything with it. All right? Just if you want more, because this book talks about it, but it doesn't get into it in tons of depth. So what I did, again, if you care and if you don't, fine. But just so you know, if you go out to the in class, there is a folder for today, and it's got, I called it Ray Wenderlich Auto Layout, but these are some of the better articles I found on auto layout. Auto Layout 101. There's actually a site out there that's called We Heart Swift. You know, and its symbol is a big heart. A little corny, but this was from the app Coda book that we talked about a little bit last semester, and it's a chapter on auto layout. Ray Wenderlich always has stuff on just about anything you can talk about. I wanted to show you this. I thought myself this was cool. This right here, this is one page, and this is another page. He has probably somewhere between a few hundred and 1,000 Swift videos. And you'll notice free, and these aren't free. If you want them to be free, all you have to do is register for his account, an account on his system. Then they're free. He doesn't charge you. But if you want to learn rings around what I can teach you, take a look at the stuff that's in here. All right. Even his 2 articles in here that this is Auto Layout Tutorial Part 1. They're not short, unfortunately. This one's about 50 pages. No, 33 pages. I thought it was longer than that. And the other one is at least the same size, I believe. All right. But that's a lot of reading. I mean, you could spend all your time just sitting there reading and not doing anything. I get that. But, I mean, if you want to learn, there's some good stuff out there. All right. So he says there, one way you can do this is you can hard code stuff in. I want the width to be this. I can do that, and it'll work just fine. Or I want the width never to go above that range. So you can do that. So you can do it with actual code. All right. And he gets into a lot of stuff in here that, I mean, he talks about content hugging, compressions, resistance, etc. We'll look at a little of that, but it's fairly heavy stuff. I'll let you take a read on that. But these are the 3 ways that you can do it. So these are what the next 3 chapters are about. Using Interface Builder, just Interface Builder to do all your auto layout. And that's using those pin and the other menus that I showed you that are down at the bottom. All right. You can use what's called the visual format language, or you can write just straight code. Okay, and that's what he talks about in here. And he tries to break it down. Okay, and basically he just talks about a lot of it's math, which turns, a lot of people off right away when they hear that. It's math? Yeah, it's math. And you have to have some kind of an understanding of math and to be able to understand heights and widths. The more of an understanding of math you have, the more you can do it in code, and the more you do it in code, the more complete you can be. Anytime you're using the interface builder to do it, you're giving a lot of your power away to the software, whether you realize that or not. You're telling the software, you know what you're doing. You fix these constraints, and it will do it in the best way it knows how, which may or may not be the way you want it to be done. You can still override the stuff that's done in there. All right, but that's more work. But if you learn how to do this in code, there's nothing stopping you. You can put stuff anywhere you want, make it do anything you want it to do. That's what he talks about in there. So in chapter 19, he talks about how to do it in Interface Builder. All right, and there's a few things in here. Again, he says by default, auto layout is switched on. All right, you can always go back and you can check it, but it should be on. See it right there? Use auto layout. See right below it? Use size classes. Auto layout, new way. Size classes, old way. All right? They're both on by default. And it says below this is another thing called size classes. And again, that's more the older way of doing it. And he says, so this chapter can focus solely on auto layout. It says turn them off. If you don't turn them off, when you try doing certain things, all right, you're going to get dialogues that are going to come up and say, this is going to jack basically with the size classes based on the emulator that or the simulator that you're using. Do you want to do that anyway? By turning that off, those messages go away. That's the basic thing that you get out of doing that. There it is. Disable size classes. Okay. All right. And it says, although it's enabled by default, Interface Builder does not automatically apply any constraints as views. So you have to do them yourself. All right. And they mention in here, if you click on the view controller thing that's up here, and you go to your attributes inspector, that is a way on your screen. If you do that, it'll say inferred for orientation. It won't say that. It'll say inferred because the inferred orientation is portrait. If you click the drop down and you choose landscape, it will immediately take your screen and do this to it. There are other ways to do it as well, but it's a fast way that you can switch back and forth between those. And the reason you might want to do that, you come up here and you create your app and you've got a label here, boom, it looks fine. Now you move it over here, what the hell happened to it? It's actually there, you just can't see it. You'll have to swipe one way or another to be able to see it. All right. And again, I may have told you this before, I may not have, but notice what it says in here. It says similar problems occur with different iPhone devices. It says with the preview screen, if you want to, in your preview screen, it says you can click on the automatic item that's in the upper bar across the panel and select preview main storyboard. And when you do that, you can click it in here and it'll show you a variety of devices and what it looks like in there. We'll try to remember to do that on Thursday so that you can see it. It's similar, not identical, but if you remember, one of the things that we had in Android was there was that one thing where we could bring up a whole bunch of different emulators at the same time. It's a very similar concept. All right. To change the orientation of a device preview, as it says, you can take your mouse and you can click down where it says over here, and you can change it. This is what we'll be spending a lot of time on Thursday. All right? Because what they've done over here, this is called the pin menu, right there. And when you click that, it looks like this. So what it says is add view constraints. If I want there to be no view constraints whatsoever, I want to put something in a spot and I never want it to move from there. What will happen is once I move it there, these will all be set. If I click on these things that are here that you can barely see them right now, they turn red. If they're turned red, that means they're on. You set a constraint. All right? They're off right now. But if I click here and here and here and here, down at the bottom here, I get a message that would say add 4 constraints. All right? It keeps track. So if I only care about setting things up, that's one way I can do it. I can also do that in conjunction with this. Notice I can say I want equal widths. I want equal heights. So there's stuff that you can do in here also. It's not going to make much sense to show that to you unless you have your machines on and up and running. All right? And there might be something, hey Jeff, this doesn't work, why? And I won't know. So I'll ask John. All right. Is that okay, John? I'll just ask you. If I don't know, I'll just ask John. All right. Some of the other stuff you can do that makes it simple, notice what you can set up by default here. This is the one next to the pin menu. You can tell it to center itself horizontally in the container that it's in and or vertically in the container that it's in. All right? So what you're saying is I always want it to be centered right there on screen. You know this already, that if this, I don't care if it's portrait or landscape, if I click and I put it literally right in the middle, so where I put it right there, if I go from one orientation to the other, it's not going to stay. But I can help it stay that by just doing this. There's some cheap little things that you can do, just adding a couple of those things that will do almost all of your auto layout for you. That's where we're going to start next time. Yes.
Now with iOS, it's like how Android is, where it starts in Java, where 00 is actually the top left corner.
Yeah, it still is. Yeah.
Okay, so if it's set 00, then it wouldn't put it right in the middle.
Technically, what that means right there is there is no centering whatsoever.
Oh, okay.
All right.
So that's not like
It'll make more sense when you see it in action. All right. Now, when you go through there, as it says, what'll happen is sooner or later you'll set up one constraint someplace. Then you'll set up a constraint someplace else. Okay. And when what'll happen is on your screen, so on here, you'll still have all your stuff, but in the worst case, you're going to have red lines And in the other case, you'll have orange lines. If you have red lines, what the system is telling you is that you have two constraints that you've set that are in direct contradiction with each other. All right, so you tried to do two things that don't make sense to the system. So it made it red because it's trying to tell you, I can't do that. If there's a possible problem, it'll put it in orange. So you say, well, geez, then what do I do? Well, one thing you can do then is you can just tell it to reset itself to the suggested constraints. The best way to learn this is to just create a simple project, drag a bunch of junk out, start moving it around, start playing with those things, turn stuff on, turn it off, and just run it either run it in the simulator and make it go, back and forth between portrait and landscape, or the other way that we just looked at. All right, so they're showing you some of the cues. Typically, when it's blue like this, that's a good thing. The constraint made sense to the system. Again, there's orange, and it's letting you know there could be a possible problem, and you'll see it like this, and occasionally you'll see it in red. I don't know if they show it in here or not. Believe me, I've done it enough. I've gotten plenty of red ones. All right. All right. The aspect ratio, again, that doesn't make any sense to talk about that right now. Now, again, the other ways that you can do this, so they've got an example. So what I'm going to ask, you don't have to turn this in, but what I'm going to ask is after we do an example on Thursday, if I were you, before I'd start on the next assignment, I'd do this one. Because he's walking you through step by step. It's one thing to have me walk you through something step by step and kind of be doing stuff on the fly. It's another thing where he shows you the interface, and it's not much of an interface, but he allows you to put stuff in here, and he shows you what happens is it looks real cool. You put two labels in here, but then he says, now what we're going to do is we're going to right justify the label, and we're going to put a lot more text in here. And he shows you what happens when you do that. You get that cut off. And that's actually a good thing because it's teaching you what you want to do to keep that from happening. That's what he walks through in here. All right? And he fixes it. Okay? Now, the next couple chapters that are in there, this one talks about how you can write your auto layout constraints using code. To me, maybe I'm wrong, to me, this is an advanced topic. If we can do it using, just using Interface Builder and you all understand that, that's a big victory as far as I'm concerned. You can go back then, so it won't be quite as powerful, but there'll be a lot of stuff that you can do with it. It's kind of like when you, I mentioned this before, if I get Visual Studio, if I get the free community edition, all right, it doesn't cost me anything. All right, but there's a few things it doesn't give me that the paid version does. Guess what? I don't give a damn because I'm not going to use those anyway. So for free, rather than $350, I'll take free. All right. So he shows you how you can do this in code, and it's literally coming in there. The good news is when you set layout constraints and you start putting this in, what you're going to find is the IntelliSense is going to kick in. All right, so it'll try to help you, but then you're responsible for putting right values in there. All right, so he goes through a bunch of them. So here, as it says, this is a button view named My Button that's 5 times the width of a label. All right, so you can see the multiplier. And it's just, that's what this chapter is he gives you a bunch of examples. All right. But again, it's not my goal in here to go over that code with you. Anything that you do in here we'll be able to do, hopefully, or you'll be able to start doing on Thursday. All right. Then he talks about, cross-hierarchy auto layout constraints. What does that mean? Well, if you've got a view within a view, problems that you can run into, and I'm not talking about two different screens, I'm talking about you put a view inside of your current view controller, some of the problems that you can run into. All right? And again, there's some good stuff in here. He talks more about outlets, and there's some good code. You can see how short that chapter was. All right? Chapter 23 is on this iOS auto layout visual format language. So it looks a little different. It looks like this. You put everything inside of brackets. All right? And it's been described as kind of being a cross between code and doing something from Interface Builder. All right. So you'd say, well, is there an advantage to doing that? I've read the chapter several times. It's another way of doing it. If I said, oh yeah, this is a better way, I'd give you with the false impression that, yeah, you ought to be always doing it this way. No, you should. It's like anything else. These chapters show you 3 ways of doing the same thing. I would suggest, again, we do the project on Thursday, go back, do that thing in chapter 20, and do it using Interface Builder. Then go back and see if you can do it with code. Then go back and see if you can do it with a visual format language. All right? And then finally, this last chapter, this is using those size classes, the things that they turned off previously. Long story short, what they say here is back in the day, you didn't have iPads, and you basically had about, basically the size of all the size of all iPhones were basically the same. All right, so you could use these size classes. It's kind of look at it that auto layout is size classes on steroids. All right, so as it says, in the olden days, if you were going to create an app that was going to run both on an iPhone and on an iPad, you need to create 2 different apps. You'd have to have view controllers for each one. All right? And that's what they talk about in here. It says size classes categorize various screen areas that a user interface is likely to encounter during execution. All right? And again, they will be these things that you see down here with that WNE and that HNE. If you've never done it before, go ahead and click those. What's going to happen is it's going to show in here. That's your storyboard. And as you click those, it's going to change to show you how it's going, basically the size on different devices. All right, and that's the way that you used to do it. There's nothing wrong with doing it that way. Many people do it that way. Here's an example right here. So they run you through a thing here, and they even give you an example of deciding both for an iPad layout and then adding some pictures and stuff to it, okay, and then designing for an iPhone layout, all right, and again, adding pictures to it. Now, again, I hope you don't feel that you're getting hosed by this. There's just no way with a book this big we can spend a lot of time on anything, all right? When we come back a week from now, notice what's next, storyboards. So I guarantee you that a week from today, we're going to build our first app that's going to have probably 3 screens on it. We'll have an opening screen and allow us to go back and forth between 2 other screens. We won't be choosing single view application when we do that. All right? That's all I had. Look at that. You still get out 7 minutes early.